There we go. All right, now officially welcome to our webinar all about America 250 and how we can use this opportunity for as a moment of reflection. And so we're really excited to have with us today. I have Natasha Varner, who is a program manager with For Culture in their Heritage Department, as well as Paul Winterstein, who is the executive director for Issaquah History Museums. Natasha and I were involved in a panel at the Washington Museums Association this summer, all about America 250. We got a lot of positive feedback, and one of the projects that we discussed briefly in that talk was some of the work that Issaquah History Museums was doing for America 250. And so we wanted to use this opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into that project, to hear a little bit more about that work and what's that's meaning for both the museum and for the larger community in Issaquah. So I'm really excited to turn things over to Natasha and Paul and share their experiences. So with that, take it away.
Thanks so much, Dylan. We're excited to be here and so happy to see, for me, many new names in the room. If folks don't mind introducing themselves just in the chat and say where you are, I'd love to get a sense of who's in the room. And yeah, as Dylan mentioned, I'm a heritage program manager at For Culture, and I'm also a historian, and just coming off a year serving as an ESSET 250 fellow with New America. So America 250 has been on my mind a lot. At For Culture, for those that aren't familiar with our organization, we're King County's cultural funding agency, and we use a racial equity lens to fund, support, and advocate for culture to enhance the quality of life in King County. So in that position for culture, I have the privilege of working with lots of historical societies, museums, archives, and other entities dedicated to heritage and cultural preservation. So that's how I became familiar with Paul and the project we're going to be talking about here today. And in my work as a historian outside of For Culture, I'm often drawn to more challenging aspects of our past because I think they're really fruitful grounds for public discourse about who we are and who we want to be and what kinds of repair needs to be done in order to get there. So I really appreciate that Washington State Historical Society invited us both here today to talk more about a project that I think illustrates how America 250 can be used as an opportunity to dive into these difficult conversations with an eye towards healing. So for the format of this, I'm mainly going to be asking Paul to talk more about the work he's doing in Issaquah. And then at the end, we'll open up the floor for conversation and questions. Okay, Paul, so first set us up a little bit and tell us about the mural that you're working on at Issaquah History Museums and how it came to be in the first place, and dip into the controversy around it a bit too, if you can.
Thank you, Natasha. And let me say first, too, I want to thank Dylan and the Washington State Historical Society inviting me to be here today. We're a smallish cultural heritage organization, and we're really grateful for the support we get from you and from For Culture and from you, Natasha, our program manager. So when we got contacted and hear that you think something we're doing is really worth your time and your listeners' time, it's very affirming, and it motivates us to do even better. So thank you so much. A little bit of background. So we have hanging in our historic Issaquah Train Depot Museum a mural that was painted 50 years ago in celebration of the bicentennial, 1976. Interestingly enough, that was funded by federal dollars. And at that time, it was the King County Arts Commission, now For Culture. I'm sorry, I might throw in some history talk during all of this. I just can't help myself. But this mural, a local artist, his name is Bill Haddon, was selected, and it is a centerpiece in our museum. Our docents are trained to provide interpretation and tell that story. It focuses on early Issaquah history, and some of the elements in there are pretty progressive for that time of 50 years ago. We did acknowledge and includes a panel of indigenous peoples that were here. But also, it was recognized over time that some of its depictions and some of the voices that are not in there, people started to notice that this is one person's voice, and that the many different cultures that were a key part of the first Euro-American settlers and of the native peoples who were here, they're not; those voices are not included in this early Issaquah history mural. And so my predecessors, so I've been here about 2.5 years, had a lot of conversations about maybe we should take this down. There are some elements that are somewhat insensitive and to some actually offensive. And there was over the years many conversations with For Culture about what to do about the mural, because For Culture is the custodian and the owner of it. It's on loan to us in our museum, so we don't actually own it. And so the controversies kind of came from the public, that we're seeing this, and there's, like I said, parts of it are somewhat offensive to people. And should we do something about that? And so I inherited that issue, and then what happened since then? Actually, I never saw this happening when I first came.
Thanks for that background. And Dylan, I don't know if you have the PowerPoint that I sent over, but
Unfortunately, it didn't seem like
oh,
I don't think
okay.
it came through yet. So,
Okay.
but if it comes through later, I'll just pull it up kind of later in the conversation
Okay,
so we
so
have some reference.
I'll set you up, Paul, with the next question, and also might be able to pop on an image of a sketch of the mural while you're talking. But yeah, so you explained how the mural came to be as part of the bicentennial. How did it come to be the centerpiece of your America 250 celebrations, despite the kind of controversy and challenges that surround it?
Well, certainly we didn't set out to do that. And there's a background story. And I also want to call out one of the people joining us today is Inara Sheldon. And I can see Inara. Go ahead and wave. Inara is a senior at our local high school, and Gibson Eck High School does require that to graduate, students complete a capstone project. And Ainara was interested in Issaquah history and had stepped forward, and we were connected by one of the teachers there. And the is it one of our historic figures in Issaquah, his name is George Tibbets. So this drawing, dead center middle, guy whose top of his head is the highest, his name is George Tibbets. He's quite memorialized within the community. There's Tibbets Creek, there's Tibbets Valley Manor, which the city of Issaquah owns. There's a park called Tibbets Valley Park, and so he has been memorialized. And Anara, was speaking, came forward with that. He has memorialized, but he also was a principal player in one of the darker aspects of our history, which is actually captured in this mural. In the mural, it's labeled as the anti-Chinese riot. And Tibbets was the justice of the peace at the time, and there were 3 Chinese workers who were murdered during this riot. And among others, he was actually charged as an accessory to murder before the fact. He never went to trial. The charges were dropped, so that there was no trial. He was never determined to be guilty or innocent. But but he was part of this event, and Ainara was questioning whether or not the city should continue to memorialize such a person, which is a really great question. And we started talking with together. It's like we can't change. It's harder for us as Issaquah History Museums to change the name of a park, for example, but we do have this mural, and maybe we can address kind of the this aspect of Tibbets and our history by doing a project related to this mural. And that's what started the ball rolling. And so earlier this year, we hosted 2 community conversations. We brought about 30 people in total attended. We presented the mural, talked about it kind of left to right. So the timeline goes from left to right across the screen. And we had conversations, and there was a lot of good questioning from the community. And one of the key points, there were a number of key takeaways. One was that this mural is the voice of a single person. We're grateful for the elements that he included, but it is only his voice. and that the very diverse kind of cultures that were part of this early settlement of Issaquah isn't represented so well. And so that kind of came forward. Yes, this is one voice representing multiple voices, multiple cultures. And then specifically, there's a piece in there. It's hard to see. It's in the just right at the center there. It's labeled the anti-Chinese riot. For some of the members, and I think for Inara herself, she's testified how like to them that was an offensive representation. It stereotypes the Chinese workers that were here, and it almost seems like they were an instigator. It's easy to get the interpretation wrong, and we realize, okay, instead of maybe it was created in 1976. Here comes 2026. Uh, let's take this opportunity to provide a more contemporary interpretation and invite the many different voices that were Issaquah then and are Issaquah today to help us tell the kind of the early history of Issaquah. And that was kind of the first big step that we made. And I thank you too, Natasha. You attended the second public conversation that we had, and you gave me a little nudge along those lines. And as the more I looked into that, I realized that this is a good idea. And I want to say too, this happened early in the year. Later on, we're going to talk about what's happening at the federal level. So this happened before some of the issues in our space became national issues. We were starting to go down this path.
Thanks so much for sharing all that, Paul. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can get back to my document with questions on it. And Inara, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, I've witnessed and heard so much about your great work. So glad you were able to make it today, and maybe later during the Q&A session, we can invite you to come off mute and share too if you'd like. So yeah, so Paul, there's a lot of complexity to this project that you've taken on, and just in looking at the mural, you can see there's so many layers to it. So out of all of that, how did you figure out where to start? And as you mentioned, you're many months into doing this work, so where are you now with it?
Yeah, I think the pathway that we took, again, we didn't map it out in a lot of detail, and I think this is a good example of something I think we might talk about later in this presentation. It was really through our relationship with others and with Inara and her family included as well that we realized, there's a real interest here in correcting and kind of telling the story of the Chinese migrants in a much more balanced and way that doesn't kind of it isn't stereotypical. It focuses on maybe the humanity of the people that were involved. And that was with that energy present. We were really quick to decide. Let's do that. Let instead of creating an all new mural, let's break it down into its components. Let's pick one episode or person or maybe some new ones, and let's build out new pieces using art because it is a mural. Let's get some new art to provide some visual surrounded with the proper interpretive text to break this early Issaquah history into these many components, each of which could stand alone on their own, but together they'll kind of be this contemporary interpretation. And so with that passion to do something about how the Chinese massacre, as it's often referred to in Issaquah, that's how it was just through that real interest that came from Inara to do this. And so we and the project we have right now is to procure a new piece of art that the viewer of the artwork should be drawn into and should feel and sense the humanity of the people that are center of the story. In this case, primarily the Chinese workers. And if nobody even reads the interpretive text, if they have some type of empathy and some type of positive reaction to that image, we feel we would have succeeded. they read the interpretive text that's going to come with this and learn this whole story, which was a very difficult time for Chinese migrants in the late 1800s, and not and still to today to some degree, of course. That if they read that text and wow, I've learned more history, and if they are moved at all, have some sense of empathy toward the people who were victims of this, then we feel we would have succeeded. So we actually put out a call for art to local high school students. We put out a request for qualifications. They sent in images of work they had done. We selected 3 to provide us concept pieces, and we brought those forward. Well, actually, they're still on display at Gilman Town Hall in Issaquah. And last week, we met as a panel and selected one of the artists who will be asked to create the new centerpiece for this aspect, focusing on the Chinese migrants. And so we're at that point later today. Matter of fact, an hour after this webinar, I'm going to be meeting with the high school artists that we've chosen to kind of kick off this project. And we're hoping it'll be in the fall timeframe where we will be installing in our museum this piece of art with interpretive text that it's just one element of early Issaquah history. But we want to take this one all the way soup to nuts before we begin tackling other elements, because there's a mining history, there's a logging history, there's a hop growing history, there's the train came and changed everything. It had a big impact on indigenous peoples. There's indigenous peoples history. There's going to be a lot of threads to the final retelling or contemporary telling of early Issaquah history. And this will be just the first piece that we hope to get up later this year. So it's exciting because I don't have an art background. We're fortunate that we have a pretty vibrant art community in Issaquah, and I've been able to lean into them, and they've responded and assisted in many different ways. So this is not a path I've been down before, and we're kind of trusting that that this is the right thing to do, and we'll learn along the way.
And it's clear you're still very much in the thick of this, but I'm just curious to know what the reaction has been so far from some of the communities you've engaged.
Yeah, to me, that's the strongest affirmation we've had so far. Even back to those community conversations that we had, there were a number of people. More of the people who came to those were new. They were not currently members of our museum or not had attended or visited our museum before. More than half of the people came to those 2 events. They were new to us. So we immediately were starting to engage a wider and more diverse community. And then when we had the 3 pieces on display and opened up the Gilman Town Hall, which is another museum, hence our name, we're Issaquah History Museums, plural. We have 2 museums. We are a historical society, but they moved away from that name about 10 years ago. And so when we had those, and still have those 3 kind of concept pieces on display there, we opened it up to the public, invited people to come in, learn what we're doing, and give us their reaction to these concept pieces, and let them know that they're helping us choose an artist, not a particular image, but choose an artist. And the members of the public who came in, many of whom I didn't know, they had not visited the museum before. And for some, clearly also was a very emotional visit. I didn't dive into that and ask them why, but it's clear that the path that we've chosen has engaged and invited people who had not been part of hearing or even telling the Issaquah history before. And that's a marker along the way that's telling us that we are on the path we want.
Yeah, I'm eager to see how this continues to develop, but sounds really promising so far. And as you've delved into these more challenging parts of Issaquah's past, have there been any challenges that have come up for you or concerns as you've done that work?
And I'm always on the lookout for challenges, especially when I'm doing something a little bit new for myself and for the museums. right early on, one of our longtime members said to me point blank, "What are you doing that for? I want to learn more about, down to, a different history, this kind of more of that kind of the type of stories we've been telling in the past." Let me just put it that way. I thought, oh my gosh, okay, thanks for being transparent about that. That's fine. I still think that, however, um, um, the uh, the greatest challenges I think are still in front of us because they're the full reveal of what we're doing, the full plan for America 250. That we haven't gone out with that yet. I've been writing about it in our newsletter as my own kind of director's comments, and so people are aware that we're doing something there. But I think when there's something to come see, it's going to be in the big museum. It's going to be open, on weekends, and more people are going to become aware. And one of the things we like to do too, it's not just about an exhibit. We are planning a bit of new programming, and that could take on many different forms. But that'll be the time when I think we'll have direct conversations with more members of our community, and we're hoping that this programming too, we want to invite members of this, in this case, the cultural community, because we're focusing on Chinese migrants, members who have that, or local citizens who that is their cultural heritage, to help us with forming what that programming is, to be part of that conversation, part of that messaging. So that'll be new programming for us. And I wouldn't say it's a challenge in that it's new. It's not a challenge yet to the path that we've chosen. So I have some anxiety about that because it's new, but that isn't slowing me down.
And as you alluded to earlier, it's impossible to ignore the climate in which we're doing this work. So, since you've started upon this project, we've seen changes at the federal level, mandating how we talk about history and how we talk about America and its past. And then also new efforts to target immigrants, like the ones that made and continue to make Issaquah the place that it is. So given that context, what's rising to the surface to you about why this work's important?
As I said earlier, we chose this path. We started defining this path before these issues arose. And yeah, I'm not missing what's happening at the federal and affecting many within the cultural space. Excuse me. And however, I feel that we're responding to the wishes and the needs, some of which have been overlooked. And when Bill Haddon chose to put in his mural what he did, he chose to include, but by exclusion, he made choices not to include. And the people of our community of Issaquah and our membership, we feel that we are working for them, and we have a professional duty to continue teaching history and doing it with that equity lens. Now I'm aware of these other, but more than anything, that's a motivator. I can't put my thumb on the scale and change anything that's happening in Washington, D.C. But if one person comes to this new exhibit and they are moved to and have some type of empathetic response to this thing about the Chinese migrants that we're going to be displaying, and that in any way allows them or cause them to have more empathy to immigrants today that might be feeling some form of injustice, then we will have succeeded. And we've done what we can, and we're just focused on creating that opportunity.
Thanks for sharing that. And one thing that I've been impressed by, and watching you kind of go through this process over the past many months, is that while alongside looking at these challenging histories and challenging conversations, you're still finding a way to center celebration and celebration of America 250. And so, yeah, why do you think it's important to do that?
That's I really appreciate that question. This past 4th of July, I had the opportunity to actually participate in the city of Issaquah's 4th of July parade. The city has put together what they call the 4th of July Commission. I volunteered for that. And we did a little warm up by hosting the parade this recent year, but it's really preparing us for the citywide celebration of America 250 next year. And so I'm chairing that commission, and lucky me, I got to drive the car down the parade with the celebrity who was there. So I'm the driver, and drove down the street. And I'm not exaggerating because I took video out of the car as I drove along. There were thousands of people lined up for just this maybe half mile down Front Street in Issaquah. And there were families, they were young, they were old, they were diverse, and they were all celebrating. They were clapping, they were cheering, they were waving. There was like a community at the end of the parade at a city park. There were some food trucks, and there were yard games to play, and there were always many hundreds of people there. And there was a very festive attitude. And I was like, I'm so lucky to be experiencing that, because if I think about the difficulty right now that's emerging driven by the federal space. But if I turn and focus on what's happening right now, I know the people of our community, they want to celebrate this occasion, and that will happen whether we're part of it or not. So we want to immerse ourselves. We want to center on that celebration as well. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I think it's important that I'm going to go back a little bit here, that I think it was in 1982, New York Times did a survey, found that 80% of the cultural organizations, historical societies that existed by that time, about 80% of them had started as a result of the bicentennial. So it really drove an interest in history. And so that motivates me. I know that our local citizens saw it firsthand myself. They want to celebrate the 4th of July. And we know from history that such an event drives an interest in history. And so we've seen before that two things can coexist. And that's the framework I see that in. We can celebrate, we can teach history, and we can do it in a way to make sure that we're inviting and the voices of the many different people whose voice hasn't always been part of telling of their own history, that they're the part of the teaching of that history. And so those are, to me, they come together. If I focused on just one or the other, I'd be missing half. And so that's the framework in which I'm viewing this.
Really well put. Thank you so much, Paul. And Anira, since you volunteered in the chat to share a little bit more about why this project's been so important to you, I want to invite you to come off mute and share anything you'd like about your involvement with it and what's important to you about your work.
Great. Thank you so much, Natasha. Excuse me. I'm still recovering from a little cold, but thank you all so much for letting me be here. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this. So I just wanted to talk quickly about why this project is important to me. So again, my name is Anara Sheldon. I'm a rising senior at Gibson Neck High School, which is a big picture learning model school in Issaquah, which is why I'm directly involved with Issaquah History Museums. And one of the reasons why this project is super important to me in particular is I'm Korean. I'm Korean American, I'm Asian. I was raised in a very ethnic Asian household growing up, well, like with my Korean mother and my Korean grandmother and my great aunt. And it's just been a very big part of my life, my Asian ancestry and my Asian heritage. And that's a big part of my identity. So when I was doing this class with Jeff Retman, who's the teacher that connected Paul and I found out about what George Tibbets had done in this involvement of this Chinese riot massacre, is what I think it really should be called, because it was. And when I learned a little bit more about Tibbets' involvement, it just really made me emotional and angry, because we continue to memorialize him without ever recognizing any of the things that he had done that had harmed so many other people in our community. And now that, I mean, it's a very long time ago, we can recognize what he did, but there is no recognition of the bad things that he did as well. So I think my involvement in it stemmed from a place of emotion and passion. And I will say, when I was going into this project, I think I was a little bit in over my head of, we're going to change the name of this park, and that's what my capstone's going to be. Because it's a requirement for every junior, senior in their final 2 years at Gibson Neck to have a capstone. It is a graduation requirement. You will not graduate if you do not have one. So when I met with the Issaquah History Museum and Paul and Heidi and Paige and all the lovely people there, they said, great, let's shift that focus a little bit. And I think that that definitely helped with shaping the way that my capstone was going to go, and also giving it, is something that will affect the wider community and give opportunities to other people to learn about history and have education, like get educated on these subjects, which just by changing the name of a public park wouldn't really do that. So this is connecting with my love of history and community and art, and being able to connect those in a place that's very close to home. I've lived in Issaquah for 12 years, so it's very connected to me, and that's just a little bit more info on why this project means so much to me. So thank you all for letting me speak on that a little bit and for supporting this historical project for America 250.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's so impressive the work you're doing, and really excited to see your takeaways and where you go after you're done with your capstone project. So I hope you stay in history. We need you. So before we open up the floor, before we open up the floor to audience questions, I just want to really quickly share a couple tips for any of you who are thinking, you might want to take on a project like what Paul and Anara are doing in Issaquah. I developed these tips for America 250 for the Washington Museum Association Conference in July, and they were in parts inspired by conversations I was having with Paul and other people here in King County and at the national level. So I'll run through these really quickly. So tip 1, don't be afraid to talk about hard things. We're not going to heal from the darker parts of our history without acknowledging that they happened in the first place. And I see America 250 as an opportune time to dig into some of these tough questions. Tip 2 is be driven by relationships, not by inflexible goals. You may have a vision for what you want your America 250 activities to look like, but what matters most is the relationships that you build along the way. Let those relationships, and especially the ones with people who have historically been left out of the picture, drive your work. And those relationships will last long after the 250th is over. Tip 3, take internal inventory, then seek out the resources you need. So before you begin building relationships with people beyond your immediate community, ask yourself what resources you need to make those relationships successful. Perhaps it's anti-racist training or gaining deeper understanding of other cultural protocols. And if you're in particular hoping to work with Native peoples or highlight Indigenous history in any way, I highly recommend a training that Tahoma Peak Solutions offers. There's one called Outreach and Partnerships in Indian Country that is wonderful. I'm just going through it myself. And I'll share the link in the chat for anybody that's interested. And the last point I'll make is know this will be a marathon, not a sprint. So we've spent 250 years kind of making our history very complicated and messy, and we're not going to solve it all in just one anniversary year. So see the work that you do in 2026 and in advance of 2026 as a beginning to a long process of repair and community building, relationship building that hopefully will continue long after the 250th. So with that, yeah, Dylan, are you moderating the Q&A, or do you want me to do that?
Yes, I'm happy to
Okay.
moderate Q&A at this point. We have, a fairly small group, but if you don't mind just using the raise hand button, that way I can just make sure if we got multiple comments that I can get to everyone. So, or at least try to. So if you have a question or a comment, I will say to kick things off and to give people a chance to find that raise hand button if you need it. Need a moment to find it in the toolkit. We did have a question in the chat about if the original artist is still alive, and or does he have descendants in the area still?
No, Bill Howden passed away. I should know the year. I can picture a newspaper article about it. But I believe he does have extended family members in the area still, though we are not inactive. When I say we, Issaquah History Museums, I don't recall having direct conversation or contact with any. Yeah, I'm still thinking. Yeah, I can't recall having any contact with the family.
And thank you, Natasha. Drop the link to the training in the chat. I will also I'll send out to the email, the people that registered. I'll send out the links that are being dropped in the chat here as well, so that you can find those resources again after this meeting. And let's see. I did actually have a question while we're waiting to see for other questions from the audience, but about this, I was really drawn by Natasha, that one of your tips of being driven by relationships, not inflexible goals, and really loved, Paul, you emphasized kind of the goal of this project being about or for this project of people having an empathetic response, which I thought was, very different from what we very often see from goals for a history project, which is about, a deeper understanding of this broader complex history, right? So I'm kind of curious about how you landed on that goal for this project.
Well, one of the things I do in my job, I do travel around the community, different public spaces, and also in community spaces. And we have a program called Let's Talk Local History. And as the title suggests, I teach early Issaquah history, but it is a conversation. And it's been clear to me that people are impacted by, they desire to connect better to the place they've chosen to be their home. And when they learn about a family, a person, or event, or something and they do that in community with others, it just, my sense is that they're affected. They're transformed a little bit. They feel closer. And I've even had people afterwards contact me and said, "Yeah, I was walking down the street and I saw this home and I remember the story about that family and what happened to them. And thank you, because that's helped me feel more connected to my community." And so I began to think about the impact that we're having is that way we're kind of impacting people's lives in the sense that they feel a greater connection, and there's a tighter kind of civic thread or fabric within the community, when they learn and share it that way. And I thought, we can do the same thing. We can strive to do the same thing with our exhibits, not just in the public teaching that we do. And so that's focused on how people react and how it moves them. It's not so much on whether or not they've learned certain facts. And so I've just kind of centered on that, because I think that is the greatest. It's shown to me to have the greatest positive impact, and that's what we seek to do.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Excuse me, yeah, Paul. Paul Jackson, I see, has his hand raised. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Officially, my name is Dr. Paul Jackson. I'm a retired computer research engineer with a PhD in computer engineering. I'm not retired. I live in Tacoma now. My wife and I have a nonprofit called Swan Creek Art Academy, where we're trying to teach the next generation about digital art and music creation. So we have a lot of products as far as digital instruments, synthesizers, drum machines, We have a stringless digital guitar, and she just bought a laser engraver, so we're doing that also. So in the link, I put a link to a Google Earth tour that I made about African Americans in Seattle. So as like Mount Zion and some other places like Garfield High School and stuff like that. But since I moved to Tacoma, I figured I'm finding out there's a lot of African American history in Tacoma also. So I'm including some of those places in Tacoma in the map. Now, as far as the nonprofit, I did a playlist of some of the events that my wife and I have done. Recently, we're at the Hilltop Street Fair. We're at the Gas Works every year. The Glass Museum here in Tacoma has an event, so we're there for that. And I'll put that in the chat next. But I just wanted to introduce myself. Since I'm retired, I don't get around too much. But yeah, I'm available is the other question or other thing I want to say. So I like to ramble. So I'm going to stop, put my email in the chat and put the link to the playlist for our Swan Peak Art Academy. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Paul. You know, and I'll just say, you know, I think this is phenomenal. And one of the things I think we, you know, we often talk here as we're kind of talking about America 250, how kind of complicated it is as a moment in terms of how do we kind of focus and the energy but I think one of the things that, you know, in terms of a lesson learned from the bicentennial that I think we're seeing, you know, and we want to see happen again here around the semiquincentennial is really this just kind of this interest and flourishing of all of this historical content, right? You know, all this work that Paul, that you're doing here with Swan Creek Academy and, you know, and others, right? You know, just kind of being able to utilize this moment to highlight that work and hopefully get more excitement, engagement, just kind of in those connections and interest in our history. So thank you for sharing. Any other questions we have for Natasha and Paul about this work in Issaquah, or you know, other questions that people had as organizations really trying to think about really ways to engage in this this moment in kind of offering those opportunities for reflection, for empathy in 2026 and beyond.
Hey, Dylan, this is Paul.
Please, yeah.
I'm curious. Are any of those in attendance, have they defined any special work or project that they're planning for America 250? I'm wondering if you could just share with us, even if it's just a concept. I think it's just, I would love to hear what others are thinking about or maybe starting to do. Is
I do know we have
I'm sorry, go
I'm
ahead,
not going to
Dylan.
put it. I was going to say I know we have a couple in the audience that are planning things. I don't want to put anyone on the spot because I don't know. I don't know who's excited and willing to share. But please feel free to even just jump off mute if you want to introduce a little bit about what you're thinking about for America 250.
I'll just share that we're planning to jump on board with the idea to feature the 5 artifacts that represent what it means to be an American and having people vote on those. And then we've got an annual fundraiser in May 2026, and I think we're going to make that America 250 themed.
Perfect. Excellent. And if I can just, Aaron, the 5 selecting the 5 items that is part of this out of many one project that I mentioned at the top of the session. We're really excited for organizations to participate, and for the organizations that do participate, when you know, once you work with your community and select that item, we will put that, we'll kind of centralize all that into a map of participating organizations across the state. So we're hoping that that also provides an opportunity to kind of see and encourage people to participate, in many different history organizations across the state. See, hopefully discover a new organization or find an opportunity to engage with your organization in a new way. So thanks for sharing, Erin.
We are going to spend July through December focusing and interpreting 1 or 2 items in our rotating gallery. And we're still in the process of picking those items and discussing that.
Thanks, Anne. Oh, and I should have said, Erin with the Bigelow House and Olympia Historical Society, and Anne, who just spoke with the Skagit County Historical Society.
So sorry, I had to take a call from my boss, so I had to jump out for a minute. Are we sharing what we're doing for 250 or?
Yes.
Okay, do you want me to share?
Yeah, please.
Because you've heard it a million times, but. So we're not focusing on the American Revolution part or anything like that. We're focusing on the number 250. So we're doing 250 quotes from our community from the beginning times, from Native Americans all the way to the present day, the good, the bad, and the ugly of Moses Lake. And then I've accumulated 250 photographs from our collection. And we're going to kind of do them all in little tiny squares. I'm going to intersperse some years throughout that and ask people, do you see yourself in our history? And turn that into a collection call, because our collection isn't everybody in our community. So for me, it's going to be a way to widen our lens and do more whole history. We're going to include the panels the state's putting together. I really liked the email that I think it was Lorraine sent out yesterday with the wish wall. What is your community wish for America? Put out some post-it notes and have people do that. And we always do a concert series in the summer. So we're going to focus on American root music. And then we're also participating in the Adam Mini 1 artifact. And people have been voting all summer. We took it to the fair and to get people, because we live in a conservative community. So I thought a way to get people to participate, as I said, I had a question about America. And I got some older people to come into my booth. So.
Thanks, Anne. And that was Anne from City of Moses Lake History Museum and Art Center. Did I get that full title right? Okay, there we go.
Dylan, I'm curious from your perspective, are you starting to see items come in for the Adam Many One call?
Well, we haven't opened up our
Okay.
submission portal yet, but we've been talking with a lot of the organizations that are, we've had a couple that have kind of informally emailed me and let me know. And then, some people are just kind of doing this voting and engagement at one event. Some people are like Anne has been doing, bringing it out to multiple events. They have it up in their gallery, so they're kind of collecting feedback throughout the summer. And we suspect that there might be some people that, as they start, maybe starting this a little bit later, especially after the summer season, where there's a lot of that engagement, we might just get a lot of kind of online voting and selection. So it'll be kind of a range of how different organizations and communities participate. But I think the important thing for us is that people are doing this kind of engagement that, Paul, you guys have been doing really with a really great example with Issaquah is really kind of building that bridge, that connection to history with your community, and kind of inviting them to participate in active production of how we share and tell, this history of our community. And I think also, one thing I really appreciate about this project is also, I think that it also invites them into the messiness of doing history too, which I think is also an important thing. It's not neat. It doesn't make it maybe easy to digest, but we also know that that's how people learn best, when they have to grapple with things. And I think inviting people into that process, I think, just makes it a more meaningful experience all around. Any last comments, questions before we close out the session?
Yeah, I have a question actually. Does anybody here know Delbert Richardson?
Oh yeah.
Okay, great. I figured that since he's about African American history and African history in general, that he would be a person that needs to be included in this conversation. So thanks.
Thank you, Paul.
I just want to say this is Paul Dillon. Thank you so much for extending the invite, and Natasha for your support as well. Allison, it's good to see you again. I know I'm so glad that you could join in and were invited again. We could hear your voice as well. It was a good example of what we're trying to do. So thanks everybody for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Natasha. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you back at some of these sessions soon. And we do hope that no matter what, that you that next year provides an opportunity for people to learn more, engage with you, your organization, and your community's history. I think that's what this work is all about. And we just appreciate all the great work that you're doing. Thank you, and until next time, we'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.